it is becoming a thing of the past. You know, the ones who are a little bit different are Graham Potter and Eddie Howe, obviously. You know, I mean, we all thought Gary Monk might be in that mould as well.
This is it, though, isn't it? We're desperate for any young manager to be the next big innovative thing.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Football Ramble Mailbag. English managers and footballers cooking are the orders of the day. It's Saturday 30th of December. I'm Marcus Speller.
I'm Jim Campbell.
And I'm Andy Russell.
Welcome one and all to the Mailbag. Bloody good to have you with us. A reminder that if you want to get involved on the Mailbag, you can tweet us on X at Football Ramble, message us on Instagram at Football Ramble, and of course, you can email us, show@footballramble.com. Jim Campbell, you've got the first question, so get us underway on the Mailbag. Damn you.
I do have the first question. Now, this is from Lewis Gamble Thompson. He emailed us. Why has England struggled to produce world-class coaches/managers? We have had some of the most talented players in the world, but that doesn't seem to lead to a great coaching career. So I put that to you, Marcus and Andy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we need to reel off all the kind of stats and facts, but no English manager has ever won the Premier League. Obviously, Howard Wilkinson won the old Division 1 before it became the Premier League. So no English manager has ever won the top flight.
There is a caveat on that, isn't there? There was one guy who had I think he had a 12-point lead at some point.
But he didn't win it,
Jim. No, even then.
I mean, that sums it up. Kevin Keegan, statistically in the Premier League, is the best performing English manager since the Premier League's begun. It's the highest place an English manager has ever finished. They very, very, very rarely finish in the top four. And if you listen to yesterday's show, you'll be familiar with this set of managers. There's only, 6 managers that have won major trophies since 1992 in England.
Yeah.
Again, you'll know that if you'd have listened to Jack's Encyclopedia yesterday. The last English manager to win a major trophy in this country was Harry Redknapp in 2008. So there's a few things to set the scene for you. There's a real dearth of talent. I've probably talked a bit much already. I'll give my opinion in a second. But Andy, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I think first off, we have to say the bit about we've had some of the most talented players in the world. I think it's been fairly debunked that necessarily leads to a great coaching career. And, you know, that has been the case going back a long way. But I think particularly now, in the age of what Harry Redknapp, for example, would disparagingly call the technocrat, I think you can look at it and say you don't need a great playing career to become a great coach. You know, I think the availability of information, the level of dedication, the level of understanding of how different the job is. Assumed knowledge is really dangerous, and I think if you can come out of your playing career, and we see it a lot with pundits, don't we? Obviously, there are some very good ex-player pundits out there, but there are still a lot who think I played the game, therefore I know everything about it. Which is, I think, really dangerous, and just being able to do it and being able to explain it are two totally different things. Now,
but how does that translate to coaching careers, though? Why England have struggled to produce so many?
Yeah, but if we're talking about England specifically,
we are.
I think there are a couple of different things. Firstly, I think if you're going all the way down to grassroots level, it's expensive. It's expensive to get qualified compared to other nations. So if you look at say us producing our own José Mourinho, for example, someone who's not got a particularly storied coaching career or will still, or to bring it up to a more modern context, it's more difficult because you're talking about normal people having to find a course and bear a lot of personal expense, which I think is really difficult. So it's more likely that it's going to be limited to ex-players who want to get involved. So I think if you look at the number of qualified coaches, the number with UEFA badges in England compared to Spain, Germany, it's far less.
Do you remember the numbers?
I think
it's about 1,000, isn't it, in England? In Germany, it's about 7,000. In Spain, it's about 15,000. So they are the numbers that back your point up.
Yeah, and I think it creates a culture. If you look at like the level of coaching education, for example. It's no wonder Portugal provides great coaches, because I think you look at the structure that's there to bring through coaches, and Portugal's not a rich nation or a big nation, so that's clearly not the issue here. I think that's a huge part of it, and I think also if you look at something a little more intrinsic beyond that as well, and again Portugal is a good example, is that the level of intellectual football discussion, and still that's something that's quite new, as the use of statistics actually is quite new to English football as well. So in that sense, really English football and producing coaches is only really at the start of where it needs to be.
Yeah, no, I think you make a very good point with regards to the lack of in depth and well thought out footballing discussion. I think I know all countries, love their footballing drama in certain ways and off the pitch stuff and so on. But
there's a difference between drama and analysis.
It's a bit. Yeah. I think it's a bit tabloidy, if I'm honest with you. Do you know what I mean? I think you have to look at almost a societal level with regards to some things with football. Things don't appear overnight. You have to develop things, and you have to. And you have to create sort of new cultures, if you like. And the FA have done that a little bit with the England national team. In fact, they've done a lot with the national team. We know with the good work of Southgate. You talk about the players. It wasn't that long ago where England weren't producing players like, say, Phil Foden or Jude Bellingham. I know Jude Bellingham has played a lot abroad, fair enough. But England now, you see the young lad at Brighton and so on, these kind of players, you think, we are beginning to produce them. If you remember when Jack Wilshere was playing at Arsenal, where everyone was very excited about his potential. And I think it was Guardiola's Barcelona went there, and they were like, so what do you think of Jack Wilshere? And Guardiola was like, yeah, we've got loads of those in our academy, those types of players, So England is often a little bit behind with certain things. And I think that is sometimes true on a national level with regards to various things. I think England, that again, on a sort of societal level, and bear with me here if you will, without sounding sort of, all Brexity and isolationist, I think England, in European terms, is very kind of free market, very capitalistic kind of approach, and therefore you plug any gap, or you find whatever the need is, you plug it with whatever is convenient or whatever is kind of cheap or whatever, and I think with football, it's kind of like, well, we want a good league. Okay, well, foreign managers, they're kind of better. We'll get them in without growing your own manager, without honing it at home, if you like. And with the fact is, the Premier League, right? It's not, the FA don't administer, if you like, the top flight in this country. That tells you all you need to know. In other countries, that's obviously not the case. The Premier League, there is no obligation really. There might be a little bit in terms of in a sort of a gentleman's agreement, if you like, but there's no real obligation for the Premier League to care about what the England national team do. Whereas in the other other associations and federations, there is that. But England doesn't have an equivalent of like the coaching school. Is it Coverciano in Italy? Am I getting that? Forgive me if that's not the right. It is Coverciano in Italy, yeah. And that level of discourse of, right, we're coaches, we're gonna really sort of try and mould and shape what we're doing here. And we are going to look at our own, if you know what I mean. And I don't want to sound sort of isolationist there, but that's what you've got to do if you're going to improve English managers, if you see what I mean. And it's fine to make sure your own have chances. But also, with regards to the Premier League, I think the English managers, they've not done very well because of that old school thinking that you said, and also not having too much time because they get sacked or whatever. There's so much money in the Premier League as well. All of this goes into the pot, and out comes not very good English managers in terms of modern day football.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well that you mentioned the Premier League in general, because you don't really hear this line of thought so much these days, but it was a regular thing you would hear of people complaining that Premier League clubs don't give English managers a chance. Like, the talent's there, we just don't use it because it's not fashionable to have an English manager. I don't think that was true. But obviously the Premier League clubs aren't obligated to do anything that helps the FA or English managers, because they're essentially running the big businesses that need results. And I've read some very interesting things about the UEFA Pro Licence while I was researching this question. Because you mentioned St George's Park. So St George's Park has been there for almost 12 years, I think it is now, and it's got a sort of dedicated development centre called FA Learning, and that's a good thing. Clearly, there are things in place to try and address this slump and address this imbalance of qualified coaches that we have between ourselves and some of the other sort of major footballing nations in Europe. And I found a quote from the head of FA Learning, which I found absolutely fascinating, which said, UEFA deals in A and B licences for coaches. At the FA, we have developed our own pathway, which we've refined for our own needs, level 1 and 2 certificates, but UEFA don't include the latter within their figures. That's why we have close to 70,000 coaches at a level which slips under the UEFA radar. And why they have qualifications that UEFA don't recognise is absolutely beyond me, and perhaps sort of illustrative of that kind of exceptionalism, a little bit of isolationism in there as well. So the FA say that there are a lot more coaches than the figures suggest, and it's very, very difficult to get statistics on this sort of thing, as they're not collected very often, so often they're years out of date, and very, very hard to make judgments on. But that's absolutely fascinating to me. Now, the pro license costs close to 10 grand anyway, so if you are somebody who's perhaps not been a professional footballer at the highest level, it's quite prohibitive, and I don't think we should be, excluding anyone from this, because we just want the level of coaching to rise across the board, even at grassroots, really. And I find that really interesting. I think another big factor in it as well is that we don't really have a national style, other than the sort of the real basics of the game. If you look at say the Netherlands, they have total football. The Germans have a very, very sort of particular style that they've drawn from in the past. You could argue that Spain didn't really have that until they brought in tiki taka, and now that's been a really sort of really, really successful thing for them. They've got that national identity in a footballing sense that they haven't had before.
But I don't think that's
maybe still looking for that.
But I don't think that's quite true, even especially with Spain and Germany, because the way that what you would say are the typical national characteristics of the sort of football that Spain and Germany play, for example, they've changed drastically in the last 15 to 20 years, and even more recently in terms of Spain. Like, I was doing a round table with Xabi Alonso, which part of it made it onto the At The Match we did a Leverkusen. And Xabi Alonso, as soon as the expression tiki-taka was mentioned, he bristled. He didn't want anything to do with it. It's the same with Pep Guardiola. He won't have it at all. And, the fact is, the whole basis of a healthy coaching culture and a healthy bed of intellectual football discussion, which is a huge part of that coaching culture, is not saying this is our way and this is the way we do it and this is what we stick with. I think if you look like a coach like Carlo Ancelotti, for example, people just look at him as a player whisperer. He's far more than that, because he constantly looks at himself and how he looks at things tactically and changes it. When he left Bayern, he said, well, that went wrong. Where do I need to change? Where do I need to do things differently? Which is very different to, say, Mourinho, for example. And Ancelotti's 60 years old. So I think that having a culture, not just... I think we always have this idea of, we don't want to be like anyone else. We must be what we are. That's fine. But the fact is, football is so global nowadays and ideas are so cross-pollinated that actually... what the basis of a good coaching culture is discussion and the desire to change, adapt, innovate, all that sort of stuff. But, even if, as you guys were saying, because the Premier League has such a huge hold over global football, the problem is that even if these coaches are being produced, why would you go and get them when, if you were one of any club in the Premier League, frankly,
yeah, well, exactly.
when you can be Bournemouth and go and get Iraola?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, Andy. But also, I mean, Jürgen Klopp himself said he didn't know why a lot of English football turned away from some of the principles of previous decades, the pressing, the Liverpool pass and move, all that kind of stuff. That's he said that influenced a lot of his career, and you can't forget that England did have very innovative coaches in decades gone by. You think about those who went around and key figures in places like Barcelona and so on. I mean, you think of, or even a more contemporary, a very slightly more contemporary example, someone like Terry Venables, Bobby Rob's another one. It's all sudden Barcelona links, So, yeah, I do think, though, that this, again, this sort of, this is English culture and society. Again, it's a bit tabloidy with regards to sort of, say, football and managers, and that's why a lot of managers did play it sort of basic with Redknapp and with Warnock and Pulis and all those types of managers. And look, they achieved, relatively speaking, and I don't want to start disrespecting people, but that wave of the traditional, if you like, British coaches, obviously the lion's share would be English. It is becoming a thing of the past. The ones who are a little bit different are Graham Potter and Eddie Howe, obviously. I mean, we all thought Gary Monk might be in that mould as well. But
this is it, though, isn't it? We're desperate for any young manager to be the next big
but
innovative
in the same
thing.
way, though, the reason why I likened it to the players earlier is we were desperate to have players who could play in between the lines and who were kind of a bit number 10-y but a bit sort of foreign-y as well. Well, now you've got, if you just take the England team, what Gareth Southgate says is, Bellingham's in that role, Foden can play it as well, Maddison's in there as well. I know he's injured at the moment. You suddenly kind of go, oh, okay, we've developed that a bit. There's still a bit to go, and in England are not perfect, and when it comes to the Ballon d'Or, very, very few English players get in the top three. I don't think since Michael Owen anybody's won it, although it was a bit different back then. So again, it's not perfect in terms of producing players, but it's improved enormously, and a concerted effort needs to happen with regards to English coaches and managers, and it's going to take a lot. I forget which manager it was. Could have been maybe Roberto Mancini, but I can't remember who. And he said, often the difference between... Oh, no, it would have been Fabio Capello, of course. The difference he found with players who played for the Italian national team, what they would do on their downtime during tournaments. Not that I don't think Capello ever managed them at a tournament, but he said that the Italian players, they'd have a little espresso, a little coffee, and they'd sit around, talk about football tactics, they'd discuss the games, and then have a bit of leisure time. He said with England players, they wanted to, they finished their meal, and it was like, where's the computer, where's the table tennis? They were almost like kids, if you see what I mean. Which is fine, that's not a criticism, of course. But it's just a little tiny example of how football is viewed, how it kind of plays out, and I think that chat and that kind of intellectualism, if you like, for want of a better word, is perhaps it's just not here as much as it is in other places, and that culture will have to change quite a bit for English managers to improve, really. Right, Andy, you have the second and last question of today's mailbag.
Yeah, I've got one from Matthew Ivo here. Greetings from Costa Rica. I was flicking through the TV channels in my hotel and landed on Celebrity Bake Off Colombia. The first contestant I spied was, obviously, none other than Carlos Valderrama. He's a player from before my time, but I remember his wild peroxide perm from an Italia 90 VHS I used to watch as a kid. Which ex-football players would you like to see on a celebrity cooking show, and why? All the best, and pura vida. Well, I suppose the obvious one, Matthew, straight off, we've very recently had Mauro Icardi on MasterChef Argentina because his wife Wanda was presenting it. It was brilliant, actually, seeing him do a little guest on it, go around all the people cooking, and these sort of old ladies go to Wanda, I must say your husband's very handsome, and all this sort of stuff. It was good. I liked it.
Oh, you don't want to say that to Wanda, surely. That's throwing a cat among the pigeons. Those two are on a knife edge at the best of times. I suppose you are going to see them explode.
One might say a producer prepped her to do it. Who knows?
Lewis Cook.
Very good. Thanks. Very, very good. I base this on vibes more than anything else. David Ginola. I just think he'd be a really
French.
French, charming, very personable. I'd sort of trust him. He's a man with a lot of kind of natural charm and natural sort of authority. I think he would. I think he'd host a kitchen very well, even if someone else had done all the prep and someone else was feeding him the recipes.
I have to say, Jim, I can't believe you've not gone.
Currently at Stoke.
As I was saying, Jim, I can't believe you've not gone for Arsene Wenger, because, of course, he grew up with his parents running a restaurant in Alsace. So presumably he'd have some opinions about it, and it would take him away from FIFA, which sullies one of my favourite personalities from English football of the last 30 years.
Yeah, but I mean, my dad was a carpenter before he retired. You should see me try and put a shelf up. It doesn't necessarily mean that Arsene Wenger is going to be a good cook, because he doesn't care about anything other than football, does he? I think he'd be terrible. I don't think he'd understand it at all.
No, but the presenters don't have to cook stuff, do they?
True. Yeah, I just don't think he'd engage with it. I don't think he'd really understand what he was there for. He'd be like Tim Lovejoy. He'd just start talking about football all the time. It's the last thing you want, even though he would actually know what he was talking about in at least one of those things. But I'd quite like to see Big Sam's kitchen, because it would be like no nonsense, no mucking about, very little seasoning, I would imagine. It would just boiled chicken, probably.
There was
I'd
this
be fascinated to see Big Sam's Big English Kitchen.
There was this program called Get Stuffed in the 90s, which was very much like after the pub sort of telly, and they would tell you how to like do beans on toast or like a toasted sandwich or whatever. Maybe Big Sam could revive Get Stuffed.
That would be great. Yeah. Post pub, hangover food, all that stuff. I'd be into it.
Barry Barbecue.
Yeah,
the
sure
former
Harry
Wigan
Redknapp
player, signed him for QPR.
The thing is with Big Sam, just to balance it out, we have to say he always had a bit of a left field side to him. You think of all the players he signed for Bolton. I mean, the thing is, he would do.
You know what?
Like
I agree with you. I think
a baked
he would
potato.
do an excellent paella.
He would. Well, I think that's maybe a bit complex. But I think he'd start off with like a baked potato and like beans on toast and all that sort of stuff, and all of a sudden you'd get like a Massaman curry just coming out of left field, and you'd be like,
yeah. To be fair,
that's what I'm saying.
He was very adventurous in terms of signing players and kind of thinking outside the box a little bit in a way that he didn't perhaps get credit for because of people like us. So perhaps he'd have quite a varied menu in his kitchen.
You know, in Japanese cuisine, I'm pretty sure this is true. It's maybe slightly apocryphal, but there's that fish that if you cut
Japanese
it wrong,
puffer fish,
kill everybody that eats it.
Yeah, the one from The Simpsons.
Yeah, Mourinho serving that up.
Yeah, someone's getting it. One person's getting it.
Everyone's
one of you has let me down.
Yeah. And around the table, you've got Pep Guardiola, Sergio Busquets, Daniel Levy. Like, do you know what I mean? They're all there, and they're all looking round, and he's serving it up, and you know that something's going down.
Worst
pre-season
tour ever.
And then whoever drops dead, then Mourinho runs off like he did at the Nou Camp with his hand in the air.
If I speak, I'm in trouble.
I think that would get the viewers. You got to say.
Sure would.
There we are. Thank you very much, Matthew Ivo, from Costa Rica, where the living is pure, apparently. Pura vida, as they say there. Thank you very much for listening to the Football Ramble Mailbag. We're back on Monday with our New Year's resolutions for football in 2024. To get in touch for the next mailbag, do tweet us on that thing called X at Football Ramble. Message us on Instagram at Football Ramble. And, of course, email us, show@footballramble.com. Oh, and do have a very happy new year.
Thank you for watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. A single upload. Don't miss out on the uploads. The uploads are important.